Okay, so we're diving into alternative uses of sports grounds.
Yeah, it's a guide from the Sports Ground Safety Authority.
Sounds like you're trying to figure out how to use sports grounds for more than just, like
Yeah,
games.
exactly. And how to make sure we're following all the rules.
It's interesting how this guide really gets into the specifics.
It goes way beyond just the basics.
Yeah,
We're talking about taking a space and completely changing its purpose.
right.
It was designed for sports, but now we're using it for something completely different.
Right. And that obviously comes with a whole bunch of new considerations.
Oh, yeah, especially when it comes to safety.
Right.
You've got to make sure everybody's safe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's start with like the legal side of things.
Okay, sounds good.
The guide talks about a couple of important laws.
Right.
The Safety of Sports Grounds Act, 1975,
hmm
and the Fire Safety and Safety of Places of Sport Act, 1987.
Yeah, those are pretty
It
serious.
sounds serious.
They're really the foundation for keeping spectators safe at these venues.
Okay.
They spell out who's responsible for what,
Got it.
from the people running the ground to the people organizing the event.
So it's all about preventing those, you know, really bad situations from happening.
Exactly, and making sure people can enjoy themselves without worrying about their safety.
So the guide also mentions that the local authority has a big role here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Can you expand on that a bit?
Sure, so they're the ones who give out those safety certificates for sports grounds.
It's like a seal of approval.
Yeah, exactly, like a stamp that says, hey, this place meets all the safety standards.
So you can't just, decide to have a concert at a sports ground without going through the proper steps.
Nope, not at all. It's way more involved than that.
Makes sense.
And if you're planning an event that's not already covered by the current safety certificate,
Like a big concert.
yeah, like a concert or a festival,
Right.
then you need to get a special safety certificate.
So it's making sure that the ground can actually handle something like that.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's about making sure it's equipped for those specific challenges that come with a concert or a festival.
So we've talked about concerts and festivals. What about events where there's alcohol?
Yeah. That brings in the Licensing Act of 2003.
Another layer of regulations.
Yep. It's all about promoting responsible drinking and, preventing those alcohol-related incidents.
So there are a lot of legal things to think about.
Definitely.
But it makes sense when you think about how many people could be at these events.
Oh, absolutely. Safety is paramount.
Absolutely. So once you've got all the legal stuff figured out,
Right.
then you have to figure out who's doing what.
Yeah. Who's responsible for what?
Exactly, because there are a lot of people involved in making these events happen.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The guide actually uses the term roles and responsibilities.
Yeah. It's definitely not a one-person show.
No.
It takes a whole team to make sure everything runs smoothly and safely. It's like a well-choreographed dance.
I like that.
Everyone's got their part to play in perfect harmony.
So who are the main players in this dance? Well, you've got the safety certificate holder.
Okay.
That's usually the ground management.
Okay.
They're ultimately responsible for everyone's safety.
That's a big responsibility.
Needs a lot of pressure.
And then there's the safety officer.
Right. They're like the conductor of the orchestra,
I like that analogy.
making those split-second decisions on the day of the event.
Keeping everything running safely.
Yeah, they need to be able to think on their feet and adapt to any situation.
So they're the ones you call when things go wrong.
Pretty much, you want them on speed dial.
And then you have the event organizers.
Yeah, the creative minds behind it all.
Right.
They're bringing the vision to life, but they have to work really closely with the safety team.
To make sure everything's feasible and safe.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance.
Creativity versus safety.
Exactly.
Now, what about the structural engineers? What role do they play?
Oh, they're essential, especially when you're using temporary structures.
Right. The guide uses the term overlay for those temporary installations.
Yeah, all those stages and seating areas, and even those merch booths.
It's like giving the sports ground a whole new look just for the event.
Exactly, like a complete makeover.
So the guide mentions these demountable structures. They're those temporary structures that you can easily put up and take down.
Right. They're really flexible and efficient,
Yeah.
but they need to meet some pretty strict safety standards.
Especially when you've got big crowds.
Yeah, you've got to make sure they can handle it.
And then there's the control point, which seems like a pretty important spot.
Oh, yeah, it's mission control for the whole event.
Okay.
That's where the safety team coordinates everything and keeps an eye on the crowds.
And handles any incidents.
Exactly. And it needs to be in a strategic location with a good view of the whole event area.
Eyes everywhere.
Yeah, pretty much.
The guide also talks about front of house and back of house areas.
Right. Those are key for making sure the event runs smoothly.
Okay.
Front of house is all about the spectator experience.
So that's like where the concession stands are.
Yeah, and restrooms and merch areas.
And you need to make sure people can move around easily and everyone can access those areas.
Exactly. Smooth flow and accessibility for everyone.
Got it. And then back of house is where all the behind-the-scenes stuff happens.
Yeah, all the staff areas, storage equipment.
Okay.
It's about keeping things running smoothly behind the scenes.
So it's about creating a safe and efficient environment for both the audience and the people working behind the scenes.
Exactly.
So once you've got the overall layout planned out,
Right.
then you have to start thinking about the specifics.
Yeah, all those little logistical details.
The things that can really make or break an event.
For sure. And the guide gets really specific here.
It does.
For example, let's talk about toilets.
Toilets, yes. The guide goes deep on toilet requirements.
You wouldn't believe how much there is to consider.
Yeah, I was surprised.
You've got to think about how many people are coming, how long the event is, even the ratio of men to women.
So it's all about making sure there are enough facilities to avoid those long lines.
Exactly, and to keep everyone comfortable.
Right. You don't want any porta potty emergencies during a concert.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And speaking of essentials, the guide also talks about food and drinks.
Catering.
Yeah, the placement of those food and beverage stands is really important.
Interesting. I hadn't really thought about that.
Yeah, you've got to make sure there's enough space for people to line up without blocking exits or creating bottlenecks.
And you need to make sure everyone can access them.
Right, including people with disabilities.
Okay, what about things like branding and merchandise stands?
Those need to be strategically placed as well.
So it's about finding that balance between encouraging sales and making sure people can still move around freely.
Exactly. You don't want any bottlenecks, especially when people are entering or leaving.
Makes sense. Now, what about things like marquees and tented structures?
Those can really add to the atmosphere of an event.
They can provide shade or shelter or even just create a unique space.
Yeah, exactly. But they also come with their own safety considerations. Well, fire safety is a big one,
Makes sense.
especially since those structures are often temporary and might not be as fire resistant as a permanent building.
Right. And then there are queue barriers.
Those are so important,
They might seem simple, but they're essential for managing crowds.
especially when everyone's excited and trying to get in or out.
Right. They keep things organized and prevent people from getting crushed.
Exactly.
Now, let's talk about stages, because the guide stresses that not all stages are created equal.
Right, especially when it comes to their structure.
You can't just throw together any platform and call it a stage.
Nope. It needs to be able to support the weight of the performers, all their equipment, and withstand the energy of the crowd.
Especially for those high-energy concerts.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
What about those tall sound and lighting towers?
Those are crucial for creating that immersive concert experience,
Right.
but they also need careful planning and safety protocols.
Because they're so high up.
Yeah, they're exposed to wind,
Yeah.
and you need to make sure they're secured properly.
Right? Like giant sails catching the wind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And finally, let's not forget about the field itself.
You don't want to ruin the grass.
Right. You need to think about how you're going to protect it.
Especially if you're having a concert or something.
Exactly. You need to consider what kind of covering to use, how to secure it, and how to make sure it doesn't create any trip hazards.
It's amazing how much detail goes into transforming a sports ground for these other types of events.
It really is. It's like a giant puzzle with safety as the guiding principle for every piece.
Absolutely. And we've only just scratched the
There's
surface.
so much more to explore in this guide.
Like using the field of play itself for spectator viewing.
Exactly. That's a whole other topic.
We'll have to delve into that in the next part of our deep dive.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm really looking forward to it.
Me too. This is fascinating stuff.
It is, and it's really important for anyone thinking about hosting these kinds of events.
Absolutely.
So stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back.
See you soon. Okay, so we talk about like changing the sports ground itself. But now let's imagine the crowds start coming in.
Right.
This is where things can get really interesting.
Yeah, and potentially challenging.
Exactly.
So we're talking about using the field itself for people to watch the event.
Right. Using the field of play for spectator viewing.
And the guide really gets into the details here.
It does. It's not just about cramming as many people as possible into the space.
Right. It's got to be safe and comfortable for everyone.
Exactly. And the guide uses this term, egress time.
Egress times.
Yeah, it refers to how long it takes for everyone to get out safely.
So it's not just about getting people in,
Right.
also about getting them out quickly if there's an emergency.
Exactly, especially with a large crowd.
Yeah, that could be a real concern.
Imagine a packed concert.
Okay.
Everyone's jumping to the music.
Mm-hmm.
And now picture that in a steeply tiered seating area.
Okay.
The guide points out that this setup could be really dangerous.
Yeah, people could start falling.
Exactly. It could create a domino effect and lead to serious injuries.
That's a scary thought.
It really highlights how important those egress times are.
Right. So it's not just about preventing overcrowding. It's
Right.
also about making sure people can get out quickly and safely if they need to.
Exactly. And even under normal circumstances, crowd density can impact people's experience.
So how much space each person has?
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
The guide recommends a specific density for standing audiences on the field.
Okay, how much?
zero point 0.4 square meters per person.
Okay, so that's like a little over 4 square feet.
Yeah, it helps to make sure everyone has enough space to be comfortable.
Right. And it prevents overcrowding, which can lead to all sorts of problems.
Exactly. People get anxious. They can get
It's like being on a crowded subway at rush hour.
Exactly. Nobody's happy in that situation.
But even with enough space, you still need to think about how crowds behave.
Right. That's where crowd dynamics come in.
Crowd dynamics.
Yeah, it's all about understanding how crowds move and react
Okay.
and being able to anticipate potential problems like surges or bottlenecks.
And having plans in place to manage those situations.
Exactly.
So it's not just about the physical space.
Right.
It's also about understanding crowd psychology.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. So this is where the safety officer and stewards come in.
Yeah, they're the ones who are actually monitoring the crowd
Mm-hmm.
and responding to any problems.
So they're like the guardians of the crowd.
Exactly. Making sure everyone stays safe but also has a good time.
So now let's talk about seated accommodations.
Yeah.
Because the guide also talks about sightlines when you're using the field for seating.
Yeah, you don't want people paying for a ticket only to end up staring at the back of someone's head.
Exactly. Everyone wants a good view of the stage.
Right. So you need to plan carefully
Right.
and make sure the seating is arranged properly.
Now, we talked about the risks of standing in seated areas.
Yeah, especially in those upper tiers where it's steeper.
The guide makes it clear that this is a big safety concern.
It is. People get excited at concerts, they jump around,
Right.
and if they lose their balance, they could fall.
And that could be really dangerous, especially from those higher levels.
Yes, exactly. The guide emphasizes the need for clear signage-trained stewards and even physical barriers to prevent people from standing in those areas.
So it's about having multiple layers of protection.
Exactly.
And it's not just about physical safety.
Right.
The guide also talks about the behavior and focus of concert audiences.
Yeah, concertgoers are often so focused on the stage and the music that they're less aware of their surroundings.
Which makes them more likely to trip or fall.
Exactly. So the guide stresses things like clear announcements, reminders from stewards, and well-lit walkways.
Just to help people be more aware of their surroundings.
Exactly. Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about something I found really interesting.
Okay.
It's called structural dynamics.
Structural dynamics.
Yeah, it's a bit technical.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that term.
Essentially, it's about how the event, especially loud music, can actually affect the structure of the building.
So it's not just about protecting the people.
Right.
It's also about protecting the venue itself.
Exactly. All those people jumping and dancing and those massive speakers blasting music, it creates vibrations.
Right.
And those vibrations can impact the building.
So you need to make sure the building can handle it.
Exactly. And that's where structural engineers come in.
Yeah.
They can assess the venue, measure the sound levels, and recommend ways to mitigate those risks.
So things like soundproofing or reinforcing certain parts of the structure.
Exactly. It's a really important safety consideration that's often overlooked.
Okay, so let's move on to what might be the most important document for anyone hosting an event at a sports ground.
Okay, what's that?
It's the Event-Specific Operations Manual.
Ah, yes, the Bible for running a safe and successful event.
Exactly. It's a detailed plan that covers every aspect of the event.
From start to finish.
And the guide goes into a lot of detail here,
It does. It breaks down all the key components.
starting with integrated safety management,
Right. That's all about teamwork and communication.
making sure everyone's on the same page,
It's everyone working together seamlessly and communicating effectively.
like a well-oiled machine.
Exactly.
And then there's the crowd management plan.
Right. Which is pretty self-explanatory.
It's about managing the crowds.
Yeah. But it's actually quite complex.
Okay.
You have to think about everything from how people enter and exit to managing potential surges or bottlenecks.
So it's more than just, making sure people don't push and shove.
Right. It's about anticipating how crowds will behave and having plans in place to manage those behaviors.
And then there's the stewarding plan,
Right. Those are the people on the front lines interacting with the crowd.
making sure everyone stays safe.
Yeah. Their training and communication protocols are essential.
So they need to be able to spot potential problems,
Right.
respond to incidents, and communicate effectively.
Exactly. They're the eyes and ears on the ground.
And of course, you need a good security plan.
Absolutely. That's about keeping the event secure and safe.
Right.
It covers things like bag searches, vehicle screening, all that stuff.
So it's about preventing unauthorized access,
Right.
maintaining a secure environment, and responding to any threats.
Exactly.
Now, what about medical emergencies?
Ah, yes, you need a medical plan for that.
Because you never know when someone might get hurt or sick.
Exactly. So the medical plan outlines all the resources you need.
Like first aid personnel and ambulances.
Right, and it establishes clear procedures for handling different medical situations.
So it's not just about having a first aid kit on hand.
Right, it's about having trained medical professionals and a clear plan for responding to any situation.
And no matter how well you plan, there's always a chance that something unexpected could happen.
That's where the contingency plan comes in.
The what if everything goes wrong plan.
Exactly. It covers things like weather delays, power outages, unruly
Yeah.
fans, security threats, all sorts of things.
So you need to have a backup plan for every possible scenario.
Exactly. You got to be prepared.
And fire safety is obviously a big concern.
Oh, yeah. Especially with all those temporary structures and potentially pyrotechnics.
So you need a fire safety plan.
Absolutely. It outlines all the precautions you need to take to prevent and manage fires.
It's about minimizing those risks and having clear procedures in place if a fire does break out.
Exactly.
Now let's talk about ticketing,
Okay.
which might seem straightforward.
Yeah, you'd think it's just about selling tickets.
But the guide goes into a lot of detail here.
It does. It's about managing capacity and ensuring a smooth flow of people.
Okay.
You have to think about different seating zones,
Mhm.
age restrictions, how to handle lost or stolen tickets, all that stuff.
So it's more complex than it might seem at first.
It is.
Okay, so we've got people at the event.
Right.
Now we need to get them there and back home safely.
Exactly. That's where the last mile plan and the transport plan come in.
Okay, so what's the difference?
The last mile plan focuses on that final leg of the journey.
From the train station or bus stop to the venue itself.
Exactly. It's about minimizing congestion, providing clear signage and directions, and making sure people can navigate that final stretch safely.
And the transport plan is the bigger picture.
Right. It looks at all modes of transportation.
Parking, public transport, ride-sharing services.
Exactly. It's about coordinating all those different elements to ensure a smooth flow of people to and from the event.
Now, with large crowds, you also need to think about food and drinks.
Right. The catering plan.
It's more than just providing food and drinks, though, right?
Oh, yeah. It's about ensuring food safety managing, waste maintaining hygiene throughout the event.
And speaking of waste, the waste management plan is all about keeping the venue clean.
Exactly. You don't want a mountain of trash left behind after the event.
So you need enough bins strategically placed.
Right. And a plan for collecting and disposing of all that waste properly.
Okay, now this is one I wouldn't have thought of, the wind management plan.
Ah, yes. The wind can be a real problem, especially with those temporary structures.
Right, they're like giant sails.
Exactly. So you need a plan for assessing wind loads, securing those structures, and even evacuating the area if the wind gets too strong.
It's like a mini hurricane preparedness plan.
Yeah, pretty much.
And for events that use pyrotechnics or special effects, you need a live special or visual effects plan.
Right. That's about balancing those wow moments with safety.
You want to create a memorable experience,
Yeah,
but you also need to make sure those effects are used safely and responsibly.
exactly.
And we can't forget about the kids and vulnerable adults.
Right. The safeguarding plan.
It's all about protecting them.
Yeah, making sure they're safe and well cared for throughout the event.
And finally, the guide emphasizes the importance of event records.
Right. Keeping detailed logs of everything that happens.
Attendance figures, any problems that arise.
Exactly. It's about accountability and learning from past experiences to improve future events.
So it's about making sure each event is safer and more enjoyable than the last.
Exactly.
This operations manual is really impressive.
It is. It covers everything.
It might seem overwhelming at first,
Yeah, it's a lot of information.
but it breaks down the process into manageable steps.
Right. It offers clear guidance and practical advice.
So it's a really valuable resource for anyone planning an event at a sports ground.
Definitely. It helps to ensure that these events are not only entertaining, but also safe and well managed.
Wow. It's amazing how much goes into putting on one of these events.
Yeah, you really don't think about it when you're just there to enjoy the show.
Right. It seems so simple from the outside.
Yeah, but there's a whole lot of work that goes on behind the scenes.
To make sure everyone has a safe and fun time.
Exactly.
This guide really opened my eyes to all of that.
Yeah, it's a real eye-opener.
It shows you that transforming a sports ground for a different kind of event.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about setting up a stage and, selling tickets.
It's a lot more than that.
It's a whole process.
It is.
With a lot of different moving parts.
Yeah, and it requires a lot of expertise and coordination.
And you really have to understand those unique challenges that come with it.
Absolutely.
One thing I liked about the guide
Yeah,
is that it emphasizes a risk-based approach.
that's really important.
It's not just about following a checklist.
Right. It's about understanding the specific risks for each event.
And for each venue.
Right. Because every event is different.
Exactly.
And every venue has its own unique characteristics.
Right. So you can't just have a one-size-fits-all approach.
You need to be able to adapt
Definitely.
and think on your feet
Yeah.
and be prepared to adjust your plans if necessary.
Exactly.
I think this guide is a really valuable resource.
It is.
For anyone who's thinking about hosting an event at a sports ground,
Mm-hmm.
it gives you a framework to work with,
Yeah, a roadmap for success.
but it also encourages you to be thoughtful.
And flexible.
Right, and to always prioritize safety,
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
creating a safe and enjoyable experience for everyone,
Exactly. When people feel safe, they can relax and have fun.
and make good memories.
Exactly.
So after going through this guide, what would you say is the most important takeaway?
I'd say it's the importance of planning.
Careful planning.
Yes. And attention to detail. Every step of the way.
From the very beginning when you're assessing the risks
Right.
to developing those detailed operational plans.
Everything needs to be carefully considered.
Absolutely. You can't afford to cut corners or overlook anything.
Because the consequences could be serious.
Yeah.
But it's not just about avoiding problems. It's also about creating something special.
It's an opportunity to create a truly memorable experience.
And this guide gives you the tools to do that.
It does.
To make sure your event is both entertaining and safe.
Exactly. And by putting safety first,
Right.
you're not only protecting people.
The attendees and the staff.
Yeah.
But you're also setting yourself up for success.
Exactly. Because when an event is well run and people feel safe, they're more likely to come to it for more.
So this guide is a must-read
It is.
for anyone who's planning an event at a sports ground.
It's a roadmap to success
It's a reminder that with careful planning
and collaboration,
and a commitment to safety.
these events can be truly amazing.
Well said. So that brings us to the end of our deep dive into alternative uses of sports grounds.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It really has, and I hope our listeners found it informative.
Me too.
It's amazing how much goes into putting on these events.
Yeah, a lot more than meets the eye.
But with careful planning and a focus on safety.
You can create something truly special.
So until next time, keep exploring
Keep learning.
and keep those questions coming.
We'll be here to answer them.